So let's take a look at our count checkboxes with jQuery demo. So this is a really neat process here. Basically, we're going to count how many checkboxes we have checked, and we're going to do two things with that information. The first is we're going to display how many checkboxes we have checked in this label field, and then the second is we're going to perform some dynamic validation on the submit button. So let's take a look at the demo first and see how it works. So first things first, you'll notice that I have one checkbox checked, and our number here is appropriately displaying how many we have checked. If I check a second one, the number goes up, and if I check a third, we're actually going to hide the submit button and display a warning message. Now I should note that this technique of validation this way is not foolproof because it's not being handled on server side. So in theory, it'd be quite easy with somebody with JavaScript knowledge to manually show our submit button and just submit the form anyway, even if they had more than two checkboxes checked. So it is important to note that if the security is a must on there, you're going to need to write some custom PHP code that essentially iterates over this array of items and rejects the form submission if that's hit. But that's a little bit beyond the scope of this. For now, we're just going to assume that we're going to work with JavaScript. Okay, so how does this actually work? Well, everything is kicked off here on our checkbox item in the extra attributes, jest code, event, etc. And we're issuing an on-click event to a function called Count Boxes. And boxes is defined in our JavaScript topcode section. So if I actually click this guy right here, we're going to open up the JavaScript code that we're writing. So the function then is fairly standard, and it consists of two main areas. The first I'm going to dispense of rather quickly, which is just this document.ready. This is how, when I load the form, we get the appropriate number of boxes counted when we load the page. So it is conceivable that you have a multi-page form, maybe fill out the first page and you have a valid number, but if you went back to the form or you reloaded it, it might be that we already have some items checked. And so we want to make sure that we handle all the logic in this block when the page loads. So we just simply issue a call to our handler function, count boxes. Now count boxes as a function does a few things. The first is it's going to get the number of boxes checked, and it uses a bit of jQuery to do that, and it uses the selector. So in this particular case, FB field-colors is the name of this checkbox group. So it's very important to note that this colors block right here, let me go ahead and make a comment of this. This will need to change based on your form field item name. So make sure that if you use this code that dash colors, well, not the dash, just the colors bit, will change based on whatever the name of this field is. And because that value is so important, it always displays in the dark gray box. So first things first, if you're going to use this code, make sure you look at the checkbox name and you replace that with this right here. Then we issue a selector to basically look for all the checkboxes that are checked, and we get its length. And now when I run this code, number of checked is simply going to be how many of these checkboxes have been checked. Then we issue a call to update this label right here. So boxCount.html is going to equal the number of checked. So what's important about this is boxCount is a manual div, or in this case, a span that I've created right here. So I have a standard section header item. So I just added one of our header text items, but then I added some HTML to basically say your ID is equal to box count. This is important because I actually use the exact same technique in box count validation. So I create a span, I make its color red so it looks like a validation issue, and I give an ID of box count validation. Now this is important because if we look at our code here again, we're actually going to notice that box count validation is right here. So anyway, to back up just a little bit, we're going to issue some HTML right here that basically says put the number of boxes that are checked in this guy right here. Then we're going to perform our validation. So let me tag this. So this is our validation step. So basically what happens here is we're going to say how many boxes have checked. If it's less than or equal to 2, we're going to show that submit button. You'll notice here that I'm using this full syntax of FB_FLD dash. This is really important because when we actually look at the source code of our page, that value that we show right here, so if I select the select item, you can see that the field is called submit. That's actually the name of the submit button itself. So I could see its ID as submit. However, its wrapper, that is the thing that wraps the submit button, which is how we perform show and hide logic, is actually this fully qualified name right here, this FB_FLD dash. You can actually see that here, that as soon as I do this, it's this guy that gets display none. It's not the actual submit button, it's its wrapper. So whenever you're trying to hide and show fields in RackForms, it's always important to remember that you want to take the field name and append this FB_FLD dash to it. And again, that's why we do this right here. We're saying show that submit button. However, if we have more than 2 items, we're going to hide the submit button, and then again, we're going to grab that little span out and we're going to insert the HTML, you only may select 2 checkboxes. Now what's important about this is that this guy right here is going to be set if we have more than 2 checkboxes checked. But by default, notice that we always set its HTML to blank. Right? So we don't have to say in this if statement right here, make this blank. We're just going to do that regardless. We're always going to clear out an error, and only if we have more than 2 are we going to actually display an error in that box. And that's basically it then. Again, if we look at the demo of the form, we have the proper number checked on load, and if we have more than 2 checked, we're going to show this value, and now the checkbox can't be checked. Again, not perfectly secure because somebody could just manually show that button anyway, but again, if you wanted to, we need to go into the PHP code and look at that array, see what its length is, and then redirect our page if we have an invalid value in there. So that is our look at the Count Checkboxes with jQuery demo.